Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to be speaking with my good friend, Greg Chertok. He's a sports psychologist. He's a fitness consultant who works with athletes on performance, and he's also a columnist in USA Today. How are you, Greg? Welcome.
Hey, Doc. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, my buddy. So crazy times, and hopefully we can jump right into some thoughts on how this crisis is impacting you and family, and is everybody safe and well, I hope?
Yeah, thanks for checking in on that. Everyone here is healthy and well, and so in my house I've got a 2 and a 4 and a 7-year-old, and the way it's worked out in beautiful ways is a lot more quality, genuine time with them, and my daughter learning her 2-wheel bike, and trying new things and new experiences in the house. But it's kind of served as an opportunity for a little bit of family growth, even though there's some disruption outside of the home.
That's actually a great place to maybe kick off here. Is you have these young ones in the house. I have teenagers, so a lot of the fitness that I'm making them do are exercises that I do myself. My son plays football, so I'm lifting weights with him, and we're running. The girls are doing yoga together, and they're lifting weights also, and they're doing their fitness together, and sometimes we do family yoga. What things are you doing with your little ones to keep them active? Because it's so hard to confine them and contain them.
It is. And I think thankfully with the approaching of nice weather, it's been convenient to be outside, and we're limited to our 0.3 of a mile neighborhood space where we feel comfortable going. But there are bikes and scooters, and a nice backyard. They have gym class assignments through their remote learning programs that they're obediently engaging in. We're doing a lot of movement, and I think especially with young kids, if I were to kind of wag my finger and say, now children, it's important to be fit and healthy, come on, let's work out, it would induce an eye roll, and it might lead to some resistance. But when it's done in the form of music or art or dance, some that children are naturally passionate to just simply move their bodies or to the beat of something rhythmic.
So what's your go-to, Greg? What's the go-to dance or what's the go-to video that you put on to get the little ones moving?
So I'm going to give you 3, which are obscure, but it's a surefire win. Number 1 is Irish dance music. There's no particular artist in mind, but the beats it's impossible not to kind of pelvically start thrusting. Irish dance music, African drum music, which we found some lovely YouTube videos, and then Flatt & Scruggs, which is like a bluegrass music from the early-ish mid portion of the 20th century.
That's cool. So that's something people will get on right away and search on YouTube to find some videos to dance with the little ones and get them moving. I agree with you. Dance is like universal, right? So every culture throughout history has had dance as part of their culture. So the little ones love to shake and move and pop. But when you can't be outside on a rainy day, there's a great recommendation for the little ones to keep them moving, keep them active. So here we are. It's approaching the middle of the spring, and we should be gearing up for the Tokyo Olympics. And those poor souls had to evaluate all of their goals and try to find ways to stay motivated. But all athletics, right now are on hold, and so many, unfortunately, have lost a season that they've been working for varying periods of time. Some people their entire lives for this moment. So in thinking about that and thinking about various levels of athletes participating at different levels and what they're going through, can you speak a little bit about what might be happening in the athlete's mind right now with seasons that have been taken away?
Yeah, I think to varying degrees, every athlete identifies as an athlete. Some intensely, fiercely, and others a bit more casually. But every athlete will regard their athletic participation in pretty strong ways. And so when you are participating in a sport and then beyond your own terms, have that sport thrust away from you, and that sense of identity is lost, it can feel like a real sense of loss. It could almost feel like a natural grieving process akin to maybe losing a loved one. And so a lot of the athletes I'm working with are feeling, a variety of emotional effects from having something that they've prized and cherished and dedicated lots of time to suddenly not be a firm part of their life.
Yeah, and that can feel differently for various people. And when you talk about identity, I'm thinking about Bill Walton, and he was a basketball player, and he played under John Wooden at UCLA, and then went on to play with the Lakers. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Laker. Yeah. So, he's somebody I like to look at his quotes. He's got some really great quotes. Maybe not as great as Yogi Berra, but he's got a bunch of good ones. And one of the things he says is that, he was a scrawny kid and he didn't fit in well in various social circles, but, sports were his thing, and that's where he found his identity. That's where he found a place to belong. So more than his personal identity, also the group that he relied on. And we do rely on each other. So can you talk a little bit about what, in terms of stages of grief, somebody might experience, and maybe elaborate on that, because it might help to shed some light on what individuals are experiencing with a season or an event taken away from them that they had been working so hard for.
Yeah. So maybe 4 or 5 decades ago, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had come up with this seminal text titled On Death and Dying, in which she outlined the 5 stages of grief, the psychological processes that accompany losing a loved one. And over time, with more research and digging, we've come to appreciate that the stages themselves aren't experienced linearly. It's not that we sort of robotically fall into stage 1 and then 2 and then expect 3 and 4 and 5. But, and at least in my experience now, now professionally, I'm transitioning from dealing with performance enhancement and on-field issues to now the coping with the emotional baggage that comes from not having a sport anymore and the reestablishment of routines. There is an assortment of emotional experiences that an athlete can have in dealing with what's going on right now. And so Dr. Kubler-Ross outlined these 5 stages, and they go as follows. So stage 1, and again, not necessarily linearly, but she outlined them in this sort of order. Stage 1 is denial, in which we downplay the significance of what's happened. We might deny its presence at all and say this isn't a big deal. In fact, we'll be back on the fields tomorrow. Let's conduct business as usual. And they might be shopping and training and conditioning and living their lives as if nothing has happened. And I still, to this very day, on the 29th of April, I'm working with athletes who have yet to really acknowledge the severity of what's going on and have been unwilling to adjust their schedules. Stage 2 is anger, and anger is very creatively sometimes directed at a variety of people, whether it's myself or the athletic association for taking away my sport, or my parents for not sheltering me any better from this pandemic, or any kind of spiritual or religious being for just to kind of project our anger or frustrations onto something or someone. Stage 3 is bargaining, which is the hoping and wishing for just another opportunity. I would give anything for just another moment on that field. I would give anything.
That's Greg. That's where I'm at. I'm 43 years old, and it's been I don't know how many years since high school and college, but I would give anything to put that football helmet back on and get back on the field.
No, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of these viewers who would echo the sentiment. We should probably address that in a future session. So I'll put that on the shelf, and we'll get back to this. So bargaining also involves the sort of regrets of maybe not doing things the way that I wanted. I should have put more time and effort and energy into optimizing my skills and my talents, and that oftentimes bleeds into stage 4, which is a depression or a sadness, which makes it hard to be motivated to perform quotidian tasks, and it makes us feeling a lack of motivation to shower this week or month, or do our schoolwork, or perform the routines that we need to feel like contributing members of society. And ultimately, a stage that only the most enlightened and evolved and open-minded are able to get to is the idea of acceptance, which is the acknowledgement of reality, that what's happening really stinks, but it's happening. And so my responsibility is finding a way to move forward.
Yeah, I think maybe taking a moment to address the depression that people very likely have in this moment. That's the overwhelming emotion that I'm seeing in our communities, and we're usually dealing with various stages of these grief reactions in our athletes. When I send somebody to you for an ACL and they need to find themselves again in their rehabilitation process, or somebody who's retiring because of an injury, and you do a great job with that. But right now, there's like this mass sense of depression for student athletes and professional athletes, and really anybody who is working hard towards a goal and suddenly had that taken away. I know I have my personal and professional goals, and I know you do, and none of us planned for this. This was not part of the plan. So let's just, for a moment, imagine if I'm a high school senior right now and I'm going into my senior season, and suddenly they're telling me, no, you can't play lacrosse this spring, and I've had that taken away from me. What things might you say that can be generalizable to our track athletes that missed their senior season, or they're missing a big competition that's coming up or was supposed to come up? And how would you speak to that person?
So to start, I think it's important to listen to their language. And oftentimes when an athlete is twirling down this negative spiral, their language oftentimes is indication that where they're putting their attention is likely in the wrong place. And oftentimes with an athlete who's really struggling, I'll find that their attention is perhaps on the future, pining for some desired resurgence of their season, or kind of envisioning what things are going to look like when they're back on the field of play, which oftentimes, rather than leading to a sense of hope and optimism, it oftentimes leads to a little bit more helplessness and dread for what's happening right now. And sometimes athletes will be yanked back into the past, and will be wishing and hoping and praying for what was, and looking back with this kind of everlasting fondness over how life was so great, and how it's kind of different than things are right now. So oftentimes an athlete will be yanked away from what's fully present right now, which is the only thing that's within their full power to control. And I think a lot of athletes will find themselves just mired in the uncontrollables. It's so tempting to, isn't it? It's tempting to think about what's going to happen next week, or what the school board may decide to do, or what the weather might be like tomorrow. I didn't need to get outside. I have to get out of this damn house after 2 weeks. Yeah, it's easy to find ourselves, shining the flashlight of our attention on things that we have absolutely no power to change. And that often leads, it kind of ignites more helplessness. And it doesn't lead to this energized spirit of taking action. So oftentimes I'll ask an athlete, it does stink. I get that. And I think we're all, and I think there's some kind of a healthy normalization in knowing that like 4 to 5 billion people are also sheltering in place. And we're all kind of in it together. There's something lovely.
We're all in it together. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a really important message. We are definitely all in this together. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. So despite our lack of connection, that I guess arguably provides more connection than we've ever experienced before, knowing that over half the world is doing exactly what we're doing right now. But oftentimes I'll ask an athlete, what about this situation can you firmly control, and what is beyond the power of your control? And it takes great awareness and great courage to kind of loosen the grasp of the things beyond our firm control, like the social or economic or financial climate, or school resuming, or when my sports participation is going to come back. I guess the only things that we really have control over are the ways that we're responding to this.
Yeah,
how are we reacting to the situation?
That's ultimately all we have, right? Is just the way we respond to adversity. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about all these kids at home and young adults that are struggling with this, and our coaches, and wanting to give them something actionable that they can do. And I was retired early because of concussions in my sophomore year of college, and never realized the expectations I set for myself, and that really helped to shape a lot of what I did later. And I think that although nobody really wants to hear this right now, the adversity and the thing that you didn't expect is often the blessing that you can sprout from. It's part of that hero's journey concept. But for
That's right.
athletes at home right now, yeah. So with athletes at home right now, I think it's important for them to connect with their peers, maybe jump on a Zoom meeting, maybe have some coach directed Zoom meetings, make sure that there's a social connection to help with any of the depression or separation anxiety that's happening, where people really did have their toolbox set in their sport in terms of resilience and strategies. But other actionable things, other things that kid at home can do right now to take control. What are the controllables, Greg? What things can I do right now? I'm losing my senior season. I'm not going to get that scholarship that I thought, or that place on the team, or have those experiences. And I want to look forward to something. How do I engage? What do I do right now?
Right. So, well, first I'll address the lovely thing that you said before, which is about adversity, that adversity isn't intended to feel good. Adversity is supposed to be uncomfortable, but it's only when we're kind of craning our necks and we're looking at it in the rearview mirror. When it's behind us, can we confidently say, yeah, that was really worth it, or I'm glad that happened, or I really learned a lot. But in the moment, you're not kind of sitting back, settling, and reflecting. You're like in the trenches, and it's really unsettling.
You're in the fight.
So yeah, right. So we're kind of fighting now, and I guess the advice we're trying to dispense is that eventually this is going to be seen in a different light, and it should be uncomfortable, but it's also going to yield something beautiful afterwards. I think that it's helpful to think of some of the theories that drive our understanding of human motivation. And one of the ones that I hold near and dear in my practice is the self-determination theory. This idea that, you know, certain psychological criteria have to be met in order for us to feel most intrinsically motivated and engaged with what we're doing. We have to feel, so non-negotiably according to this theory, we have to feel competent, we have to feel connected or related, and we have to feel autonomous. In other words, we have to feel really good at what we're doing. For a lot of athletes, we no longer have that very thing that makes us feel competent. We have to feel autonomous, like we have choice, like we're acting according to our own volition, like we have some say in the direction that our life heads. Right now, I mean, it seemingly, you know, the fate of our sport is not on our own terms, and it's been thrust away from us. There's no choice in that. And the connectedness or relatedness or belongingness component. We need human touch and constant interaction as a social species, and a lot of us aren't getting that, at least in the capacity that we're accustomed to. Even a high five from a teammate, which is so, you know, it's so taken for granted. But we look at those moments, and we would give at least $18.50 for just a single high five from a teammate.
How much is a chest bump worth then? If a high five is $18.50, a chest bump has got to be worth at least $40.
That, I would say 3 figures. Come on, Doc. Hold on a second. So let's think of ways to satisfy those criteria. And I think, and again, these are ideas that, and when I'm working with an athlete, I never encourage an athlete to take the words that are coming out of my mouth and to obediently take them and to apply them as they've been conveyed to them, but rather to take the ideas and to feel willing to reshape them to fit the life that they're living. So these are generalities. These are ideas that are now encouraged to be molded to fit your current lifestyle. I think to satisfy, I guess, first the need of autonomy. One of the things that we do have full control over is how we structure our time, you know, how we schedule our day. And you know, I'll share a short story which has always been you know, a favorite of mine. I'm not sure of its veracity, but it sounds like it could be true. So this philosophy professor standing in front of his class, and without speaking, he takes out a large empty glass mason jar, and he proceeds to fill the mason jar to the top with golf balls. And he asks the class, "Is this jar full?" And the class kind of awkwardly looks around and they say, "Well, yes, it is." And without speaking, he goes under his desk and he takes out some pebbles, and he pours the pebbles into the jar, and the pebbles kind of trickle and fall between the crevices of the golf balls. And he asks once more, "Is this golf ball full?" And the students are onto him, and they say no. He takes out some sand and pours that, and they trickle into the cracks and crannies and until to the very top. And he says, "Well, how about now?" And they yell now feverishly, "No!" And he takes out some water and he pours that to the very top until nothing can be filled. And he says to the class, "What is the purpose of this?" And somebody yells out, as maybe some of your viewers might be thinking, initially, you can always do more. You can always give more when you think that you've done enough, it's sufficient, there's more to give. And he said, that's absolutely wrong. That's not the intention of this. In fact, what this means is that if you don't take care of your golf balls first, there won't be any room for them in the end. If you fill the mason jar with water or pebbles, and then you decide there's this really big thing, this really important thing, you won't have any room for it. And so it's important to take care of your golf balls first. It's important to take care of the really big stuff, the importance of the stuff of personal and emotional significance first. Somebody who claims that time with their family is a golf ball, and going, and I guess in this climate, this is not an appropriate example, but going to the mall with friends, it's pebbles. But then neglects to hang out with their family, to go to the mall shopping with their friends, isn't living in alignment of what they claim is really important. Not to say that we should never go to the mall, but I think there's some utility in being clear and consistent with what is most important in our life. And so I think before we even consider scheduling anything, we have to ask ourselves, what demands our priority? What deserves?
Doesn't this time right now? I think it lends itself to having some clarity on what's important. You have everything is on pause, everything's slowed down to a halt, and here we are with nothing but time to evaluate our priorities.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, this is a good time for that, and it's a good time for people to really take an inventory and say to themselves, how have I been living, and what have I been up to, and what really is important to me.
But Doc, there are plenty of people who have claimed over the years, it is important to kind of clarify my priorities. I need to know what's really important to me. But when we're living in the hectic, nonstop nature of daily living, a lot of us will just kind of kick the can down the road and say, well, eventually, but I can't do it now. There's simply no time to reflect. But now is a forced pause. It's an opportunity almost to force us into an evaluative and reflective moment. So we talk about things aren't either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Everything is kind of neutral until we affix a label on it, a positive or negative label.
And so that student athlete that's living right now in that space of this is terrible, right? This is a terrible moment. Well, it hasn't shown itself yet, not yet. Which is another parable that I think is a really cool one to kind of piggyback on the parable part of this conversation. That there's a Chinese farmer, and he has a horse run onto his property sort of unexpectedly. And when the horse comes, his neighbors come and say, "Wow, what great fortune!" And he says, "We'll see." And then his son learns to ride this horse, and the neighbors say, "Wow, look at your son, what a talented boy, what great fortune you have." And he said, "We'll see." And then the boy falls off of the horse and he breaks his leg, and his neighbors come and say, "What terrible fortune, I'm so sorry this happened." And the farmer says, "We'll see." And then the army is marching through, and they're recruiting young folks to fight in the war, and they can't take his son because he has a broken leg. And the farmer obviously says, "We'll see." But the point is you never know which meandering life is going to take us, in which direction and which outcome. So I think that's what you're alluding to. And for a student athlete or somebody who's had this moment of pause, to have something stripped away from them and now have to reprioritize and ask themselves what's important. We're not asking those kids or those folks to lay down and just take it as it comes, but more importantly, to reassess how important certain things are. How important is your physical fitness? How important is taking the time to connect with your peers? The things that made sport important to you in the first place. And maybe if you think about that and you take that time, maybe we can set some priorities. Maybe we can figure out some strategies to apply. And I think that's where you're going with this. And I think that's a super important point for people at home. At least I feel like that's where you were leading me, Greg. I feel like,
oh, yes. Isn't that the goal of a skilled therapist is kind of giving the impression that you're leading yourself toward positive insights?
You mean I didn't figure that out by myself? That was you bringing me there?
We'll let the viewers decide that one, I
guess. This is why I love you, Greg. It's always fun. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
So I think, for an athlete who throws up his hand, who has, confirmed the importance of physical fitness, and has thrown up her hand saying, well, I don't have my, shiny new state-of-the-art 20,000 square foot facility to work out in. You needn't more than 5 square feet to get a really powerful workout. There have been athletes for many moons who have said things like, I've always wanted a 6-pack, or I need to work on hip mobility, or I really need to get more confident and work on these kind of much neglected mental skills. There doesn't seem to be a more fitting time to take care of the things that we claim are important, maybe haven't found space to practice. And so if we're looking at that competence piece, we need to feel accomplished. We need to feel productive. There are athletes I'm working with who have picked up, the Rubik's Cube, or baking, or hairdressing, or new languages, really, and it's almost giving them a very similar kind of satisfaction, because the human brain, like the human body, needs stimulation. It needs constant stress, and our response to kind of like painfully go through the process of adapting to that stress leads to growth. And so, again, this isn't an encouragement to throw down your sport and to pick up Taekwondo, but it does mean that in the spirit of viewing this as an opportunity for growth, as every moment as an opportunity for growth, we can still maintain some semblance of physical fitness while also opening up our minds and our eyes and our hearts to the prospect of this being a chance to kind of work on something that we haven't before, or view the situation with a new perspective.
Yeah, I love that as a place to draw this in, and I think that's a good place for people to focus their energy right now. Is what can I do? What thing have I neglected if I'm an athlete that could be foundational? And we're going to have a talk in the future with some other strength and conditioning people that are going to show some exercises. But let's first get the mind right and refocus our energy mentally so that we can be prepared. And if I were to summarize for a coach, I'd say let's get a Zoom meeting for our kids together, our young adults. Let's get them together on a Zoom meeting. Let's connect. Let's talk about what's bothering each individual collectively, because that process of commiseration can be powerful to shine a light on emotions that may not be immediately palpable. And then let's try to encourage one another to work on things so that when this is over, we can hit the ground running, because that's certainly a concern of ours in the sports medicine world. We've got kids and young adults deconditioning at home, and we hope that when we start ramping up, we're not going to see a rash of injuries. But if we work on the foundational skills, balance and quickness, and things that we can do, like Greg said, in a small area. So do you have a favorite, I always say to my patients, you can do your exercise right before you shower in the bathroom, some push-ups and bodyweight squats, and shower up and get ready for work in 5 minutes. If you're not doing anything, that's a great place to start. Do you have 1 or 2 exercises at home that might be foundational that you'd like to share with people?
So when you say exercises, are we talking physical or mental?
No, I think right now we're focused so much on the mental part of this. Get the mind right so we can get the body right. And maybe we'll do a future talk where you and I go through some of the fitness things, because you are a beast in your own right. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I'll yes. Yeah.
I put you on the spot there, Greg. You're a hell of an athlete. We know that. So talk to us about, 2 exercises. Let's keep it to 1. 1 solid exercise an athlete can do to start to get that mind tight and ready to reframe this so that they can find some motivation.
I think the most basic, and there really is an abundance of exercises and strategies to move forward with. I think the most basic one is our ability to mentally rehearse scenes or images from our sport, our ability to image or to visualize. If you look at the research behind what physical practice and mental practice, how they differentiate. If I were to ask you to, let's say you were a tennis player, to step onto a court with your racket and 10 balls and serve 10 consecutive serves, there are certain parts of your brain, certain motor and spatial parts of your brain that are activated, that are needed to perform that task. If you were to sit down, put your racket down, close your eyes and imagine in vivid detail those same 10 serves with precision and having a sense of control over the image itself, the same neural pathways are being activated when you're just kind of imagining it. In other words, your brain doesn't really know the difference between doing something for real and imagining its execution. And so for an athlete who feels like they're unable to move forward or to make any kind of progressions, at least for several weeks up to a month, when you look at studies comparing a group that strictly physically practices with a group that strictly mentally practices, by the end of a month's completion, both groups have improved to a similar percentage. So for an athlete who feels helpless in their ability to make strides in their sport, to find mental scenes that they think are particularly beneficial, either like the technical practice of certain skills, or like the emotional overcoming of certain distractions that maybe have sidelined them in the past or have really overcome them with anxiety. Images of them being through adversity, images of them performing the way that they want to perform. Think of the kind of confidence that conjures. Maybe not at first. Maybe at first you don't see things in crystal clear 3D quality. And just like, cardiovascular endurance, maybe after a couple of laps, you're feeling like you can't go on any longer. For those of us without any kind of practice with mental imagery, we might not have the kind of attentional endurance to go on for more than a couple of moments. But with practice, it is like many other areas of the musculoskeletal system, it's a muscle that's expandable. It's plastic, it's growable. Our ability to be in an image and to see things with more vividness and to be more controlled with what we see.
Yeah, we've learned that in neuroscience over the past few years. When I was a kid, people would say, certain things would kill brain cells, and you never get those back, right? And what we've learned in neuroscience, especially in the study of concussion, is that you do actually grow and repair in the brain much more slowly than other tissues. But your brain is not this static structure. It's malleable, and this practice of visualization and creating these pathways is an active process. This is not a passive process. And I think that that's a really important point to drive home as you're saying this for people to understand that this is not sitting back and relaxing. This is not relaxation therapy. What Greg is talking about is an active exercise for your brain to establish and reinforce connections, sort of similar to walking the same trail in a forest every day. The first few times down that trail, it's not going to be so clear, but as you beat that path down, the path will widen and you'll have a more clear path to walk through. That's sort of the way that's the picture in the brain that happens. You create these pathways. So I love that as a practice for athletes who may not have practiced it before. To come back to Bill Walton, he talks about the season he spent injured as the most important season of his career, because that's where he got to see things in his mind for the first time. Before that, he was just a player, if there's such a thing. And after that injury, he was more than a player. He was able to see things in action in his mind, and he was able to anticipate differently, plan differently, and execute differently. So that's a really awesome point, Greg. I really like that.
Yeah, and I think, number one, you seem like an immense Bill Walton fan. That's number one.
I don't even like basketball, as crazy as that is. It just so happens that he's the only one who competes with Yogi Berra in terms of awesome quotes.
I think to drive the point home, if you're looking at the tendency of Olympic level athletes to use mental training, I think it's now about 95 to 99% of Olympic athletes are using some form of regular mental training, like imagery. If we learned that 99% of my favorite baseball players are wearing the same cleats or drinking the same protein shake, I'm going to be clamoring to the stores right now to buy that. If all the greats are doing it, so this should be a welcome opportunity to work on, for a lot of athletes, a much needed and oftentimes neglected skill of performance enhancement.
Yeah, and if you're a senior, or if you're a person who missed that thing in your mind that you thought was the final chance for you to show these skills that you worked on, or to get that opportunity you were looking for, just take it from me, and I'm sure Greg can echo this. Keep fighting, keep pushing, because if there's something that sports really does teach us, it's resilience, it's teamwork, it's persistence. So I would have never imagined at 19 years old that I would have done the things I've done over the past many years. And at that time, when I was told I couldn't play football, my goodness, it was a dagger. And it really was, it stripped me of an armor that I wore very proudly. But as you're in that fight, if you keep your chin up and you keep pushing forward, I promise you that this adversity will turn into a blessing at some point. That doesn't mean you shouldn't feel depressed, or you shouldn't feel anxious, or you shouldn't go through these stages of grief that we talked about. But it does mean that this is your opportunity to find a new pathway, a new way forward, and maybe come out of this even better than before. So, Greg, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think that just like with any physical injury, when something seems minor, when there's minor lingering shoulder pain, but you're still able to perform and you might neglect it, it could eventually turn into a crisis and some kind of a major issue. I think if anyone's feeling hints of sadness or hints of lack of motivation, but you're still able to kind of operate and function on a daily basis, don't just sweep that away. It's important to address immediately with those you love and trust, whether it's a friend or a counselor or a doctor or a parent or a family member. The act of voicing and vocalizing what we're going through, oftentimes it's shared by that person, but it's very cathartic, and it's very therapeutic to be able to convey your ideas, because then we can start to think of solutions forward rather than them festering inside and not having them addressed.
I love it, Greg. This was an important conversation, and I hope a lot of people get to see it, especially our student athletes at all high schools and colleges, and some of our professionals that may get a chance to see this, and coaches and such. So be well and be safe, my friend.